Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really big demographic puzzle. It affects basically everyone, everywhere.
We're talking about the huge drop in birth rates.
Exactly. Since the, early 1970s, the global average has just plummeted. We're talking roughly 5 births per woman, down to only 2.3 now.
Yeah, and 2.3 is actually below the replacement level in a lot of countries, especially high and middle income ones. That's the 2.1 needed just to keep the population stable.
And this massive demographic shift, it didn't happen in a vacuum, did it?
Not at all. Over exactly the same time frame, we've seen this, unprecedented explosion in schooling across the globe.
Especially for girls, yeah.
Especially for girls. Their expected time in the classroom jumped from about maybe 6.7 years back in 1970 to over 12 years today. It's almost closed that historic gender gap in education.
So you have these two massive trends happening together: falling births, rising education, particularly for women.
Which leads directly to that common assumption, the one you hear all the time.
Right. The idea that women getting more education is the main reason, maybe the only reason, birth rates are dropping. It's in headlines, it's in conversations everywhere.
It's a really, really deeply ingrained belief, isn't it? So our mission today in this deep dive is to actually scrutinize that assumption.
Okay. So we're going to test it.
We're going to look closely at the data, and we want to uncover what might be a surprising or at least under-acknowledged dimension to what's really driving these changes.
So the story might be a bit more complicated.
Oh, it turns out it's far more nuanced than people usually think. The data really invites us, forces us to question that standard narrative.
All right, I'm intrigued. Let's get into this data. You mentioned scatterplots.
Yeah, exactly. At the heart of this are these paired scatter plots. They compile thousands of data points, country year observations, stretching from 1970 right up to 2022.
And each point connects schooling levels with fertility rates for the same population?
Precisely. So look at the first plot, the left panel. It's labeled fertility versus female education.
Yeah.
And the pattern is, it's stark.
Okay, what does it show?
When women in a population average fewer than, say, 6 years of school, the fertility rate is usually way up there, often over 5 children.
Wow, high fertility, low education.
But as female schooling increases, especially beyond about 10 years, that cloud of data points just dives downwards. It flattens out near or sometimes even below 2 births per woman.
A really steep drop-off. Okay, that seems to support the common narrative, doesn't it?
It does, on its own. But then, and here's where it gets really interesting, you look at the right panel. This one plots fertility versus male education.
Okay.
And the shape of the plot is, it's almost identical. It's uncanny.
Identical. Seriously.
Practically. Wherever men's average schooling rises, the fertility rate falls along pretty much the exact same steep curve. It's like looking in a mirror.
Whoa. Okay, that is interesting. So more education for men also correlates strongly with fewer children.
Exactly. And that's the simple, but like I said, profoundly under-acknowledged point these two plots make side by side. Education in either sex maps onto fertility in almost the exact same way.
So it's not just about women's education driving this.
It really isn't, which, pushes back hard against those popular stories we hear.
The ones that put it all on women. Career focus, marrying later, maybe some vague idea about declining family values.
Yeah, those narratives.
Yeah.
This data clearly suggests we've been, maybe looking at only half the equation.
So there's solid evidence that the husband's education matters just as much.
Oh, absolutely. Compelling evidence. Take Mali, for example. There was a study looking at an expansion of schooling there. When boys got more schooling, the completed fertility by age 25. So how many kids women had? By then, it fell by almost as much as when girls got similar schooling gains.
So a similar impact, regardless of which gender got the extra schooling.
A very similar shared impact.
Yeah.
And it's not just Mali. There was this big multi-site analysis, looked at places from Poland all the way to rural Bangladesh. And consistently, higher education and husbands was linked to fewer births.
Even when you account for the wife's education level.
Exactly. Even after controlling for the wife's schooling. So it's a separate independent factor.
Right.
And zoom out even further. Look globally across 141 countries. Total fertility rates fall right alongside average years of schooling. And the strength of that correlation. It's remarkably similar whether you look at male schooling or female schooling.
Okay, that really does start to dismantle that it's all about women's education idea. It feels much more universal.
It does. So if we agree on the who, it's both men and women, then the how becomes the next big question, right? What are the mechanisms actually doing the work here?
Yeah, how does more schooling translate to fewer kids for both sexes? For women, I guess we have a pretty good handle on some of it.
We do. More school often means women marry later. for one.
Hmm.
It raises the opportunity cost of having kids early, potential careers, earnings.
Right. And better access to information. Health, contraception.
Definitely. And maybe more, say, within the household about family size. There are studies, like in Nigeria, showing each extra year of school for women is linked to about a quarter fewer births happening early in life.
Okay, that makes sense for women. What about for men? How does their education factor in?
Well, for men, more education often leads to higher potential earnings, and that seems to shift preferences toward having perhaps fewer children, but investing more in each one, child quality.
Ah, the quality versus quantity idea.
Kind of. Education can also change men's attitudes towards things like gender equality within the marriage and towards family size itself. And importantly, educated men are more likely to partner with educated women.
Ah, so that reinforces the whole pattern.
It does. It creates couples who are both likely to favor delaying parenthood and having fewer children overall.
And beyond the individual level, are there broader societal things linked to education that affect everyone?
For sure. More schooling across a population usually goes hand in hand with things like more urbanization. City living often means different lifestyles, different costs, different priorities than rural life.
Okay.
Education is also linked to better child survival rates. If parents are more confident their children will survive, they tend to feel less need to have many children to ensure some reach adulthood.
That's a huge factor historically, yeah.
And of course, more education generally means better knowledge about and access to contraception for everyone, men and women. All these things work together to push fertility down across the board.
It's a whole web of factors, really, not just one thing.
Exactly. And some of the specific facts around this are quite revealing. Like, we talk about the rise in female education, but globally, we're actually very close to parity in schooling now.
Parity, meaning boys and girls get similar amounts.
Pretty much. The adjusted gender parity index for average years of schooling is near 1 in most parts of the world. Boys and girls are spending roughly the same amount of time in classrooms, globally speaking.
That's actually really important context. It's not just a surge for girls while boys stand still. Both are rising and reaching similar levels.
Precisely. And look at sub-Saharan Africa for a really clear example of this. Women there who have tertiary education, university level, they average about 2.0 children.
Okay. Low fertility for highly educated women.
Yes, but here's the kicker. Men in sub-Saharan Africa with that same level of tertiary education, they average about 2.1 children.
Wow. Almost identical.
Almost identical. It just hammers home the point that so-called female education effect on fertility. It's not exclusively female at all. It's an education effect, period.
Which brings us to policy, I guess. If it affects both, how do interventions play out?
Well, consider this experimental program they did in Kenya. They reduced the cost of school uniforms, a major barrier for poor families, for both boys and girls.
Okay. What happened?
Both the boys and the girls ended up staying in school longer. And interestingly, both groups also delayed starting families. They delayed their first births.
So helping both boys and girls with education costs had a similar dampening effect on early fertility for both.
Exactly. It really highlights how policies that support education for everyone can influence fertility outcomes across the board.
You know, it's interesting. There's another separate trend involving men that's happening concurrently. The documented decline in sperm counts globally.
Right. That's a significant concern regarding male reproductive health.
Yeah, and it's happening alongside this rise in male education and the related drop in fertility we're discussing. But you rarely hear those two things linked in the broader conversation about birth rates, do you? Even though both are male-centered trends impacting reproduction.
That's a very interesting observation. The conversation tends to focus heavily on female agency or female education, often overlooking parallel trends or factors related to men.
So while this overall pattern, more education, lower fertility, seems global, does it play out exactly the same everywhere?
No, there's definitely variation. The general shape of the curve is there globally, but how steep it is or where it levels off, that differs.
Give me an example.
Well, in parts of Western Europe, after really strong family-friendly policies came in, thinking good childcare, parental leave fertility actually ticked up a bit among highly educated couples.
Interesting. So policy can moderate the effect.
It seems so. But then you look at, say, parts of South Asia. There, fertility might stay above 3 children per woman until education levels get quite high, like past a full secondary school cycle.
There's a threshold is different.
The threshold, the responsiveness, yes. It depends heavily on the local context. Things like the economy, job opportunities, how strong gender equality norms are, whether affordable childcare exists. All these things shape how strongly education translates into lower fertility in that specific place.
So context is key. It's not just a simple mathematical formula.
Not at all. But the big picture, the main takeaway from those side-by-side plots remains powerful.
Which is?
That this whole phenomenon of falling birth rates, it's definitively not just a female education problem or consequence. That narrative is just too simple. It's incomplete.
Okay, so if it's not that, what is it reflecting?
It reflects a much broader social transformation, one that schooling brings about for everyone in society, men and women alike.
A transformation where spending more years learning changes fundamental life choices.
Exactly. When both men and women are more educated, they generally tend to start families later. And crucially, they tend to want to invest more resources, more attention in each child they do have.
Which naturally leads to having fewer children overall.
It does. It becomes a systemic shift in how people approach family building, not just a choice made by one gender.
This has huge implications for policy, doesn't it? Especially for governments worried about low birth rates.
Massive implications. If policymakers think they can boost fertility by, say, limiting women's education or career options, well, they're completely missing half the equation, aren't they?
They're ignoring the male education side of the fertility coin.
Exactly. And worse, policies like that risk actually damaging the economic growth that widespread education helps to create in the first place. It's counterproductive.
So, if we've sort of debunked the old story, what does a better evidence-based approach look like? If a country does want to support families and perhaps nudge fertility up slightly?
Well, the evidence points towards supporting family formation in ways that don't penalize education or careers. Things like making quality childcare affordable and accessible,
Right, it makes sense.
promoting equitable workplaces, offering generous and, crucially, inclusive parental leave for both parents.
So, supporting parents rather than trying to manipulate education levels.
Precisely. Support families, support gender equality, and continue to expand access to quality education for all genders. That seems to be the pathway that aligns with both individual aspirations and broader societal well-being.
It's about creating an environment where people feel they can have the families they desire without sacrificing other life goals.
Exactly. The core insight really is that education's impact on fertility isn't confined to one gender. It's universal.
A universal impact. That's a powerful final thought. So maybe here's something for you, our listeners, to chew on. If this impact of education on something as fundamental as fertility is so clearly universal, affecting both men and women in such similar ways, what other big social changes might we be mistakenly pinning on just one group when the real drivers are actually much broader, maybe more universal than we tend to realize?